Thank you all very much. It's great to be here. I'm not joking. Please sit down. It's great to be here. I want to tell you, as Tony said, I didn't forget where I come from. I'm almost home. I'm a Scranton boy. Just up through the Mahanoy Valley, I get home. You know, you're getting me closer to God's country. But I want to tell you something. I got to tell the press this. You know, there's constant arguments about guys like me who thought they were pretty good football players in high school and college. You know, I got a lot of Secret Service agents that are Texans. All you agents, look around the banners on this wall. When I was growing up in the 80s, my kids, Central Bucks and now CB West, man, this makes Texas football look shameful. Pennsylvania football is the best football in America. Next is Ohio, and then Texas. I always get kidded because I got a lot of Texans, as I said, who are on my detail. And I mean, you know, look, you guys, and girls soccer, man, you guys are incredible. Your soccer teams, what a great, great, great program you all have. And look, being here, where's Michael Fitzpatrick? Where's Congressman Fitzpatrick? You here? Stand up, man. Stand up. Michael won a great race and is a good guy. When I got to the Congress, Democrats and Republicans actually liked one another. You know, I'm not joking. I'm not joking. And literally, not a joke, my closest friends in the Congress were and still are a lot of my Republican buddies. But my grandpop, Ambrose Fitting of Scranton, were here, he'd look at Michael and say, what in the hell happened, man? An Irishman who's a Republican. You know what I mean? My grandpop used to say, all kidding aside, he said, Joey, there's two things you got to know about us Irish. He said, when one Irishman sticks his head above the lot, they'll shoot him another way to knock it off. And he said, the second one, otherwise we'd have beaten the British a long time earlier. And the second one he used to say, he'd say, Joey, when an Irishman moves to the suburbs, makes a little money, becomes a Republican. Michael, you're a good guy, and I'm glad to be here with you, and I'm flattered you take the time to be here. Thank you. This is a guy who cares about what's happening to all of you. We have our disagreements in the United States Congress and the Senate and the presidency, but I think things are coming back. I think we're getting back. Michael's one of those guys, represents a district that is kind of like where I was raised, you know, a middle-class district where people are striving, man. All we're looking for is an even shot. I've never found a place, in the places I was raised, we moved from Scranton back when I was a kid in grade school because there weren't many good jobs in Scranton. And we moved down to Wilmington, Delaware, and there were a few more jobs. Whether I lived in Scranton or Claremont or Wilmington, you know, I was raised, like most of your parents were raised, to believe that in this country, if you just worked hard, you played by the rules, you helped create things in this country, you helped the productivity in this country, you'd share in that productivity. You'd share in that outcome. And that bargain's kind of been broken, not by an individual, not by a party, just by the state of affairs. Over the last 10 to 15 years, middle-class folks have really gotten pulled behind. They haven't been able to keep up. Their wages have been stagnant. The very wealthy have gotten very much more wealthy, and the middle class have just sort of sat there and stagnated. We had a growth, and we had an increase, as you economic students will know, increase in productivity in this country at 20% from 2000 to 2007, yet middle-income people lost an average of $2,500 in income. Hadn't happened before. And so one of the reasons I'm here today is, at least in my family, I'm like a lot of folks, I'm the first guy in my family to go to college. My mom and dad didn't go to college. But my dad was absolutely, positively, unrelentingly determined that I was going to get a college education, and my brothers and sisters were as well. My dad used to always say, Joey, you're going to be a college man, from the time I was a kid. And he said, Dad, why is it so important? I give you my word, this is his constant refrain. I bet you kids can think of something you heard your mother and father say 100 times over. One of my dad's phrase was, Joey, they can take your job from you, they can take a lot from you, but they can't take away your education. I used to think, what difference did it make whether I had a college education if I didn't have a job? But you know what? It's part of the American dream. It's part of the American dream, for real, not a joke. I've never met anybody, and I've got elected to the United States Senate 7 times, and I've been vice president. I've not met any man or woman in a wealthy neighborhood, a poor neighborhood, in a Hispanic neighborhood, an African-American neighborhood. I've never met anybody, any mom or dad, who didn't want the kid to go to college, or at least have the shot to go to college. Because you know, it's more than a degree. It's more than anything. It's about who you are. You know, William Butler Yeats, my colleagues, as Mike might know, he may not because he's new and I'm gone from there, but my colleagues always kid me because I was always quoting Irish poets. The chairman knows that. And one of my favorite poets is William Butler Yeats, and Yeats had a great line. He said, education is not the filling of a bucket, but the lighting of a fire. College education not only gives you so many more opportunities, but it gives you more confidence. It gives you a better sense of yourself. It gives you a better sense of your prospects. And so it's not just the economic side of this. But here's the point. College education is slipping out of the grasp of an awful lot of people now. For the first time, and Michael knows this, for the first time, you have a slight majority of American parents with students of college age or in the queue to go to college, questioning whether or not the cost of a college education is worth it. It's the first time. That's never happened before. That's never happened before in the United States of America. And so, you know, here I am. Came up to you guys because, number one, I really always have admired your sports team, but as a Pennsylvania kid, you know, Tony said it right. You guys are doing it right. You guys have an incredible school district. My wife is a full-time, she's the first second lady ever to work full-time as a teacher. She teaches 15 credits a semester. She's taught in the high school system for 15 years, been a community college professor. She has her doctorate. And my wife has an expression. She said, any country that out-educates us is going to out-compete us. Going to out-compete us. But being here brings back a lot of memories, man. You guys, just like, I feel sorry for you, but just like when I was in high school, your exams are coming up next week, is that right? You finally got all those college applications in, which is painful. You're sitting there wondering about whether or not you're going to get into the schools you wanted to get in. And your moms and dads are looking at you. They don't say it to you, but they're looking at you, they're so darn proud of you. And they watch all those applications. First thing they wonder is why each application costs so much. But they're also thinking about what my dad thought about and what I thought about. And I don't think we're unique in this at all. They're thinking about your promise and their promise to you, at least their silent promise to you, that they'll do anything they can possibly do to help you get ahead, to help you advance. And there are a lot of them are wondering, even though this county is relatively affluent compared to a lot of places, wondering, are they going to be able to get you there? Some of them are so excited that you've applied to some of the really great schools that are private schools. But they're also wondering, my God, if my kid does get into NYU, or my kid does get into the University of Pennsylvania, or my kid does get into the University of Chicago, how in God's name am I going to get there? How am I going to do it? $52,000 a year, room, board, and tuition. What happens? You go to a great school. I went to a great state school. I'm really proud. I went to the University of Delaware. A lot of my friends went to a great school, the University, Penn State University. But what are you doing now? They got to come up with $17,000, $18,000, $19,000. That means they got to make almost $35,000 to find that $19,000. And so your parents are sitting there proud of you, hoping you have a wonderful senior year. But they're worried. A lot of them are worried. You know, I'll never forget my senior year. As I said, I was a pretty good athlete, and my dad was a sales manager of an automobile facility, a place called Porter Chevrolet in Newark, Delaware, where the university is. And we were playing a baseball game. I was from Claymont. I went to a Catholic boys' school. And we were playing, and after the game, I hustled down to my baseball uniform my senior year because my dad would always let me borrow a car off the lot to take my girlfriend. No, by the way, he didn't make much money, but that was a pretty cool deal. I had the nicest cars, four a night. And so I go down after the game on a Friday, take my girlfriend to her junior prom. I'll never forget it, because I want you kids to understand what your parents are thinking about. And I walked in the showroom, I said, "Mary, where's Dad?" She said, "He's out on the lot." And I walked outside, and my dad was pacing back and forth, really looking worried. And I said, "Hey, Dad." He said, "Hey, Joey." And he looked up at me, he said, "Joey, I am." And my dad was a graceful, you met my dad, a graceful, honorable, classy man. And he looked at me and said, "Joey, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, honey." And I thought, God almighty, something happened. I swear to God, true story. I thought something happened to my mom or my sister or my brother. He said, "Honey, I went to the Farmers Bank." That was a state bank in Delaware that his auto dealership used to finance their cars through. He said, "I went to the Bank of Delaware, honey, today and asked if I could borrow money to get you to Delaware. They won't lend me the money, honey. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." College education is about a lot more than whether you can get to college. It's about your mother and father's pride, their dignity, their sense of themselves. And so many of them, maybe not in this auditorium, this gym, but so many are staring at the ceiling tonight, wondering, how am I going to keep my kid there? How can I help him get there? Because there's nothing a parent worries about more than not being able to provide what they think their kid's entitled to. And college education is slipping out of the grip of an awful lot of people. There's sort of been a perfect storm that's occurred. First of all, middle-class wages have become sort of stagnant. Tuitions have gone up. In the state of Pennsylvania, state tuitions have gone up 2.5 times. I can tell you this. By the way, there's a couple, aren't there some state reps here tonight? Aren't there state senators? They're here today? You can tell them better than anybody can tell them that what you got a situation is where at the University at Penn State University, you're in a situation where I think it's gone up from, in 1991, 92, when I looked at it, I think it was $5,100 room, board, and tuition, because my son was looking at Penn State. I think it's now what, $18,000, $19,000 room 20? Yeah, that's room, board, and tuition. So it's gone up 3-4 times. That's what's happened all across America. Second thing that happened, when this god-awful recession we inherited, where the bottom fell out in 2008, what happened? State budgets, through no fault, this isn't a criticism of any Republican or Democratic governor or state legislature, you guys have pulled back 18% in the help you've given state legislatures and the governors to the state universities. So that's put extra burden on it, raised the prices even more. And on top of that, the way I finance my kids going to school, I have the dubious distinction, as Michael and others know, is when I was a senator, I was listed every year as the poorest senator in the United States Senate. And everybody thinks, oh, you should be so proud. Proud, hell. Those of you who, I'm sure I'm looking at a future president or vice president out here, don't do what I did. Don't get elected to the United States Senate at age 29, the very year you just paid off your college loans. don't make a commitment that I did. You never own a stock or a bond because there may be a conflict of interest. Everybody says, isn't Joe Biden a good guy? Rush Limbaugh says when they put out my financial statement as vice president, they said my net worth is somewhere between $55,000 and $150,000. Unfortunately, it's true. He looked and he said, how can that guy, man? He's made no money as a senator. I didn't think the deal was to make the money, but at any rate. And lately, ABC said, had out there a line, they said, Biden's low estimated net worth the result of relatively small income. Wrong. My low estimated net worth is the result of 20 years of college and graduate school tuitions. I hope you parents didn't tell your kids. How many parents in here? Stand up. All the parents stand up. Just stand up. Thank you all for being here, man. Thank you all for being here. Well, let me tell you, I made a big mistake. I said to my kids, whatever school you get into, I'll do everything I can to get you there. First kid goes to the University of Pennsylvania. Second kid goes to Georgetown. Third kid goes to Tulane. Then the kid who went to Penn went to Syracuse Law. Then the kid who went to Georgetown went to Yale Law. Then the daughter that went to Tulane went to Penn Graduate School. I own nothing except 3 proud kids that have an education they can never be taken away from. So look, here's the deal. And I'll get into the detail of college costs in just a second, but here's the deal. I was able to do it for my kids for one reason. Housing values were escalating in the 90s. So I was able literally to borrow against my home to pay for my kids' college. And when my last kid was out of college, I sold my home. It made sense. I didn't need as big a home. I sold my home to help pay off some of their bills. But they still graduated deeply in debt. Deeply in debt. Their debt, because of private schools, was kind of astronomical. My one son who graduated from Yale, he graduated $110,000 in debt. My kid who went to Penn and Syracuse, $68,000, and my daughter over $60,000. Even after every single penny I could borrow to help them get through school. No regrets. I do well. I do well. As the president said, by the way, we had our first cabinet meeting. He got everybody together. He said, I want to thank you all for the sacrifices you made coming into the government. Because a lot of these guys in the cabinet have made millions of dollars and they were giving up salaries, except for Joe. He's the only one that got a pay raise. Which is true. I got a pay raise. By the way, I make more than you now finally, Mike. I used to make the same thing for 36 years, but now I make more. But here's the deal, guys. The way I was able to do it is in the equity in my home. But students, when this recession hit, the middle class lost $16 trillion. $16 trillion in the value of their homes. Your moms and dads, many of them who paid every single mortgage payment, never missed one ever. Who bought their house for $250,000 and had a $150,000 or $170,000 mortgage on it, all of a sudden found out because some guys got these magic mortgages and all this sort of casino gambling on Wall Street. And what happened? 2 houses of the block go into foreclosure, and all of a sudden they never missed a payment. They find they're, quote, underwater, meaning that their house is worth less than they paid for it, that they owe more on their house than they paid for it. So now they can't do what I did. They can't go to the bank and say, can you lend me $10,000 toward my kid's $20,000 tuition to get them to school this year. They can't take a second mortgage. The second thing that happened, a lot of your parents and some of your grandparents were prepared to help. Had what they call 401ks, retirement accounts. They used to borrow against those. Can't do it because they tanked. The stock market fell. 2 years ago, we were worrying whether the stock market would go below 6,000. So the bottom line is there's sort of been a perfect storm. And one other thing, as Tony referenced, 62% of all the jobs over the next decade are going to require a post-high school degree, 62%. You're going to need at least a community college or a four-year college degree. Secondly, this unemployment market, the reason you need a college degree is the unemployment rate among college graduates is only 4.5%. It's over 8.5% for everybody else. Thirdly, if you get a college degree, right now, on average, the rest of your life, you'll make $20,000 more a year on average than anybody who graduated from high school. If you go to a community college 2 years, you'll make $8,900 a year on average, more than the kid who went to high school. And unfortunately, there are no jobs anymore for kids who didn't go to high school, no jobs. And very few jobs for kids with only a high school degree. So, conclude by saying this perfect storm that occurred, middle class falling behind, devaluation of housing and retirement to be able to borrow against, skyrocketing tuition costs, and an overwhelmingly competitive world we live in, to have a shot to be able to compete. So when the President and I came into office, and we got some criticism from Democrats and Republicans, we said the first thing we did was focus on education. The first thing we did, not only elementary and secondary education, I won't talk about that today, but college education. So we did three things. The first thing we did, which was very controversial, the government was paying banks, not a bad thing, they're good guys, it's not a criticism of the banks I'm about to say. We're paying banks $60 billion over the next 10 years to process student loans. So Barack and I, Jill, my wife, Michelle, his wife, we know one thing. Not any of the four of us would be sitting where we sit were it not for the fact we were able to borrow money, we were able to get scholarships. We could have never made it. Never made it. And so this is personal to us as well, like it is to so many other people. And so we said, look, instead of taking $60 billion and going out there and paying banks to process loans, let's just do it straight up. Let's take that $60 billion and put it all into college education, directly. So we vastly increased Pell grants. They're grants for families, grants, not loans, grants for families at income less than roughly $50,000. 300,000 kids in Pennsylvania are in college today who would not be there, flat would not be there, were it not for Pell grants. 300,000 in Pennsylvania. $9 million more kids were nationwide. Second thing we did was we came along and we said, it was a big fight, it still is, we think people should get tax breaks. We think the tax breaks should go to middle class people. And one of the tax breaks we should set out there, we put in place, the Recovery Act, is that any parent, the only good news I can give you parents now in terms of the tax side of this, any of you who have a kid in school where you spend at least $2,500 on their tuition, their room, and the board, you get a tax credit of $2,500, which means that if your federal taxes this year are $1,500, you get a check for $1,000 and pay no taxes. If you got 2 kids in school, it's $5 grand. If you got 3 kids in school, $7,500 grand. That's the difference between people being able to keep their kid in school and pay for their automobile insurance. That's the difference between being able to pay their homeowner's insurance. For families I was raised in, it makes a difference. Third thing we did was we looked at the debt you're graduating. 70% of the kids who go to college from Pennsylvania go with college loans. And of those kids, on average, they graduate $28,000 in debt in Pennsylvania. $28,000. So you get your diploma and a bill for 28 grand the day you walk across the stage. Well, guess what that does to y'all? You're not thinking about it now, but it forces you to choose a profession that you may not want to choose. You may want to come back to Central Bucks and teach, or you may want to go off and work for a nonprofit, or you may want to, join the Peace Corps, or you may want to do a lot of things. You may want to do what my daughter did. She's a social worker, a master's in social work, and she paid more for her tuition than she makes. In Pennsylvania, I might add. In Delaware, I should say. So, we find out kids weren't able to make the decisions they wanted to. They had to go do whatever it was to make the most money to be able to pay back their loan. So we did another thing that's very controversial we're fighting to keep. We said that you never have to pay back in 1 year more than 10% of your disposable income. So that means if you come at Central Bucks, I'm making this up, I don't know, at CB West, and a starting salary for a teacher is probably around 40 grand. I don't know that for a fact. Is that about right? About 40 grand. Well, guess what? The difference with that is if you come back to teach here and you have the average debt of a graduating student in Pennsylvania, that means you're going to have to pay about $320 a month back. Except if you're limited to 10% of your disposable income, you only have to pay about $180. You have to pay it back, but $180 a month back. That's a big difference when you're starting a family, trying to rent a home, trying to buy a home. So we think it matters. And the fourth thing we're doing now is, and we're going to be working with the governors and with the state legislators, we've got to get colleges to hold down costs. We've got to get them to hold down costs. The inflation in college tuition over the last 20 years, if you take 20 nationwide, is as high as 437%. It can't be sustained. And so there's an awful lot of federal money going into colleges and college tuitions. They're going to be a little bit of a bargain. They got to get better. They got to hold the cost down. We can't have this continue this way. In the meantime, we're in a position now where most of you at this school are qualified and desire to go to college. We think it's the single most important thing we can do for you and your parents right now. The single most important thing we can do is make sure you can get to college, afford to get to college, and it's not good enough to get to college. It's the graduation rate. So the first target we set as president, vice president, was we committed by the year 2020, America will once again be the leading nation in the world in the percentage of students who graduate from college. We are 16th in the world now. 15 other countries graduate a higher percentage of their population than we do. Let me ask you students, do any one of you think we can lead the world in the 21st century with the 16th highest graduating rate? Which is the very last point I want to make before I take questions from you, and it's this. This is not just about helping you. This is not just about keeping a commitment to the middle class, which has been the bargain for generations. This is about making sure America is the strongest nation in the world. It is in our overwhelming self-interest. People say, we should go out there, we should subsidize building everything from bridges to aircraft carriers to companies and to taxes for people who, quote, create jobs. That's all true. But can you think of anything the country needs to do to assure that it remains the most powerful nation in the world than educate its population? I can think of not literally. And I'm going to say something in front of my Republican friend Mike that I think he might even privately agree with. I have a pretty good reputation of being known an awful lot about foreign policy. And know an awful lot about national defense, an awful lot about national security. Guys, if you give me only one thing I can do, you give me one choice of what I can have for us to remain the strongest physical nation in the world, is give me the single best educated population in the world. That is what we're about. So folks, I know it's a stressful time for you seniors, and I really mean it. You know, it always surprises me. Parents look back and say, oh, well, you're so lucky, carefree, being a senior, nothing to worry about, right? Nothing to worry about. Give me a break. You're trying to figure out everything from where you stand in your community to what you want to be, to how you're going to get through finals, to can you get to school, to what relationship you're going to have, what your future's going to be. But let me tell you about your future. You are the most incredible generation this nation has ever produced. The 9/11 generation, they're going to write about, and I mean this sincerely, they're going to write about it like they talk about the greatest generation of my parents' generation of World War II. You're smarter. You're better educated. You're more committed to your community. You volunteer in higher percentage than any generation, including my vaulted generation of the Vietnam 60s generation. You are more engaged. Ladies and gentlemen, just since 9/11, your generation, over 2,300,000 people have joined the United States military voluntarily to go to war, knowing that they would likely go to war. And some of them, like one of your supervisor's brothers, gave their lives when they went to war. Over 4,600 fallen angels. I've been in and out of Iraq and Afghanistan over 20 times now. I wish you could see these kids. I wish you could see them. They're absolutely incredible. They're the finest warriors the world has ever created. They're also among them and among all of you. Just keep this in mind, sitting there as seniors. Nobody had anything on you when they were seniors. When I sat where you did, I was class president, but I stuttered so badly, I was so afraid I could no more have gotten up here and introduced someone than fly. I could have no more have thought that I'd get the help to get to school and I'd be able to run for president of the United States from my family and end up being vice president of the United States. Nobody had anything on you. Barack Obama, when he sat there, had nothing on you. The Nobel laureates that I work with, they had nothing on you. One of you guys, one of you women, is going to be one of the people who are on a team that finds the cure for cancer. One of you. I mean, the person who figures out how that we can make solar energy cheaper than fossil fuel and help save the planet. One of you is going to be the next Steve Jobs. Because a lot of you, as Steve Jobs said, the single most important thing to do is think different. Think different. You've learned to challenge authority in a responsible way. You've learned not to accept orthodoxy in a responsible way. That's where the genius lies in this country. And you're about to enter a period where you're going to see more change for the good in your lifetime than any generation has in all of world history. We're on the cusp of so many incredible things. That's why we owe it to you. We owe it to you to give you the tools. Because this is one incredible generation. And that's not hyperbole. That's just a simple fact of life. So folks, I get kidded all the time if your parents read about the White House. They call Biden the White House optimist, as if, as my grandfather would say, I fell off the turnip truck yesterday like I'm the new kid. I wish I was. I've been there for 8 presidents. I got elected when I was 29. I'm more optimistic today about the prospects of this country and your generation than I have been any time in my career. Because the reality is this country is better positioned than any country in the world. Our economy is still 3.5 times as big as China. bigger than the next 4 economies in the world. We're starting to insource jobs back to the United States instead of export jobs. We're making changes. I only have one request, and I'll finish. When one of you is President of the United States, and I bring my great-grandkids by to meet you, promise me you will not say, Joe who. That's all I have. Just remember I came here, and let me bring my kid in. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Let's take some questions. Okay, we're going to take questions here. And by the way, I apologize for my back. I'm sorry to have my back to all of you, and I'll try to get over there in a minute. Fire away. Who's got the first question? Do we have microphones to give these guys? Where's the team here? Oh, there you go, right there. Fire away. Tell me your name.
Kelly Schmitzer.
Hey, Kelly.
First of all, I just want to thank you. I think I can speak on behalf of all of the students, the teachers, and the parents present here today, how honored we are to have you here.
Well, I'm honored to be here, man.
We really are grateful for you being here today. And the question that I have is an issue that I feel affects the demographic of not only students, but voters everywhere, mostly minorities, immigrants, the poor, the elderly, and that is the nationwide effort going by the part of Republican governors and Republican state legislators to suppress and disenfranchise voters.
Well, look, here's what I'm going to do. I'd rather not talk about Republican and Democrat today. And it's a fair question, by the way. But here's what I'd like to say. One of the things that has been the hallmark of the United States of America is that we have always erred on the side of inclusion. And we spent, led by Republican governors in the 70s and the 80s, a Republican governor in Delaware, we started a thing called motor voter to make it easier for people to vote. So when you went and got your license and you registered your automobile, you're automatically registered to vote. And we made all this progress. And now there are some folks around the country, and it's the xenophobia that is not surprising. We've been through this before. We went through it in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and in Pennsylvania back in the late 1800s with the Know Nothing Party because they thought too many Catholics were coming in, and too many, because that's what the Know Nothing Party was about. We were too many of us Catholics coming in from not only Ireland, but Poland and Italy and the rest, and so they tried to suppress vote then. But it's always, we've always had one step backwards and 3 steps forward. I think those things that are going on around the country that are occurring in other states, I think they're going to be turned back by the court. And let me just say, our Justice Department has decided to challenge these restrictions on the ability to register to vote. But I want to make it clear, there are a lot of Republican leaders who throughout my career were leading even ahead of Democrats in expanding the vote. I think there's just an overreaction to some of the more xenophobic elements of the Democrat and Republican Party on the part of elected officials to try to satisfy them, because it's always been used every single time in American history. Those of you students of history, and that was one of my majors, every single time there has been increase and influx in immigration, there has been the cry that they're taking our jobs, we're in trouble, we're being overrun, etc. And it always pops its ugly head up, and it always ends up being put back in the box. So I think we're going to be, I think that we're going to continue to be able to say proudly to the world that we are the most inclusive, expansive government in the world. But you make an accurate point. Some of the stuff that's being done, I find, quite frankly, reprehensible. But again, that's as much as I want to say about it in a partisan sense, okay? Oh, back here. These poor folks had my back to them the whole time. Anybody got a question back here?
Can you stand up?
What year are you?
I'm a senior.
Yeah.
My name is Cole Messa.
Throughout your term, what was the coolest thing that you ever did?
I tell you, that's a good question. I'd have to say there's two things, one domestic and one foreign. The coolest thing that happened is even before I got sworn in, but after I was elected. I come from the state of Delaware as an adult. I moved to Delaware when I was in grade school. And my state of Delaware was segregated by law, unlike Pennsylvania. And we have the 8th largest black population in America as a percent of population. And so when I got to Delaware and I got into high school and college, what really animated me and my generation was the civil rights movement. Was in grade school looking at the black and white TV and seeing Bull Connors down in Alabama sig a dog on, black women dressed in their Sunday best going to church, and I mean, it enraged me. And so I got involved, and I was, as I said, a relatively good athlete, and the athletes got good jobs in the city park system as lifeguards and park directors, and I got assigned to the only totally black park system over in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware, in the projects, and got to know an awful lot of guys who have been my friends my whole life now, and I even got more deeply involved. And when I went away to law school, I graduated in 1968, the year Dr. King was assassinated. And I came home that year as a graduate to take the bar exam in Delaware. And my city was one of the few cities, Wilmington, that was burned down. There were a number of cities in the riots after Dr. King was assassinated, about 8, that were a significant portion burned down, and about an eighth of the city. And there were serious riots. And here I come home in the midst of all of this, and I go back into the community where my friends were in the East Side, and I decided I had a great job with a very prestigious and fine law firm, fine people. And I decided I just couldn't do that, and so everybody thought I was nuts. I quit that job and I joined the public defender's office. And I used to go down to the Wilmington train station when I'd be in, some of you have maybe been through on the Metro line, or you go through the Wilmington station. That goes through, they call the East Side and the 3rd Street Bridge, which is 99% African American and has been for a generation. And I used to go down there because we had no investigators as public defenders, and I'd go down and get ready for the trials, and I'd interview people. And the National Guard, which was stationed on the streets in every corner in Wilmington, Delaware for 9 months, more than any city since the Civil War in the history of the country. And to, quote, keep order with drawn bayonets on every corner. And I used to go down by the train station, and that's where they bivouac. That's where they would, that's where they kind of had their headquarters. And I was thinking, here I was in the year 2009, almost 40 years later, on an extremely cold day, January the 18th, waiting on that same platform, waiting for a train to come from Philadelphia with a black man in that train who was going to pick me. I was literally, I give you my word, it struck me. I looked out over the 3rd Street Bridge, and it brought back the memories when I was a public defender. And then I realized I was waiting for a train carrying a black man out of Philadelphia that I was about to board and ride 127 miles with to be sworn in as President and Vice President of the United States. That was the most fulfilling and chilling moment in my whole career. And it made me realize that there really is progress. If you had told me when I was a young lawyer, first that I'd be waiting for a train to go get sworn in, but I'd be waiting to be picked up by an African American to be sworn in as Vice President, I would have told you were nuts. That's the single most moving thing in my whole career. The single most significant thing in my career was when we got to the presidency. One of the reasons why I accepted the vice presidency was to end the war in Iraq. And a lot of people, anyway, well, I won't get into that, but to end the war in Iraq. And when we got there, 1 month in a White House meeting, in the Oval Office with the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Advisor, the security team, and they came forward with a plan to the President on how we should deal with Iraq and ending the war responsibly in Iraq. And the President put up his hand and said, no, 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 Joe will do Iraq. Joe knows more. Joe will handle Iraq. Report to Joe. Joe will do it. So I had the privilege of putting together the strategy, and I called the President at the end of, in early December. I went for my 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th trip to Iraq. And I got to stand in one of Saddam's palaces, gaudy, ugly palaces that we had taken over. Standing next to a guy named Prime Minister Maliki and a president named Talabani, and looking out at the commander, four-star commander of the United States Army, General Allen, and looking out at entirely the leading general for the Iraqis with all the troops assembled. And I was able to say these words. I was able to say, we're 160,000 troops here when I was sworn in. Within 4 days, there will not be a single American troop here, and we will go home and cross the border to go home with nothing but our honor and our pride. That was the most significant thing for me as Vice President of the United States of America, to be able to end the war in Iraq. By the way, Mike, we'll get a kick out of this. I called Barack from the embassy, and I said, I know I didn't want this job in the first place. This is the first time I think it's really worth it. And it was worth it. I assume you're a senior?
Thank you for the incredible compliment. Thank you for taking Amtrak also down to D.C. for so many years.
7,900 round trips.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Amtrak Joe.
My father would define that as a misspent adulthood were he here.
Well, we need more role models like you to promote public transportation. As a parent who is struggling to get 2 kids through college at the same time, at the tune of about $68,000 a year, what is driving up the cost of education in this country? I've heard it's salaries, I've heard it's health care for, but you know, you see people in Europe and they're paying $3,000 or so to get their children to college. What are our challenges here? Why is it driving us?
I'm completely candid with you and tell you one of the criticisms of our policy, so I'm straight with you, as to it's argued that federal aid to education, college education, is driving up the cost because the universities know they're going to, what is it, about $50 billion a year goes into indirectly or directly into college assistant, students going to college and college assistants. And again, the reduction in state contributions, even before the recession, states are reducing their contribution to their state universities every year. I won't say every, but I don't know every, but the vast majority. But the other thing is that college salaries for college professors have escalated significantly. They should be good, but they've escalated significantly. I taught constitutional law on a Saturday morning in an advanced course of constitutional law at Wharton University Law School for 20 years. And because I thought when I left, what I'd do is I'd be a professor. And I was amazed. My son, graduating from Georgetown in 1993, wanted to go into a PhD program to be an English professor. And I remember in the interview him asking the professor, the head of the department at the University of Delaware, how much would he start at with a PhD in 93 as an English professor at college, and I think it was $38,000 or $39,000. Well, the starting salary for a law professor is well over $100,000 in that same time frame. So salaries have gone up. The other thing that have gone up is that a lot of universities have, in competition with others, particularly the more elite universities and the elite state universities, have spent an awful lot of money in things that have nothing to do with student advancement. in to do with their boxes for their football games, their basketball courts, their physical attributes of the campus, making them more beautiful. They're much more commodious. They've done a lot of things, again, in the competition to get the best students. So there's an awful lot of money that goes into the infrastructure of universities that didn't happen before. They were still nice universities, but they did not happen before. And some critics suggest that where we are right now is all that the most significant thing that and this is a criticism and there's some justification to it, and why we're putting pressure now. The president asked leading college presidents to come and meet with us. I'm meeting tomorrow, actually I'm meeting Monday with one of the leading college presidents of one of the finest colleges in America to sit down and talk about and plan on how they make a commitment to cut college costs. There's even discussion saying that if you continue to escalate tuition beyond inflation, then we are not going to allow students to attend your universities based upon Pell Grants and/or on college assistance that they get. Now, we're not there yet. That's pretty draconian, but that's the extremes to which people are talking about. So the bottom line is the vast majority of people think there is not sufficient justification. And the only people who argue, the critics argue, that really benefit are the very poor, because they don't have to pay anything if they can get there, and the very wealthy, because they now go to universities that are much more commodious that they could have afforded anyway. But there's a lot of competition. I don't want to be too critical of the universities. A lot of competition for the finest professors. They all want the Nobel laureates. They all want the best professors. They all care very, very much about all of you in terms of what they get. So they want to be able to say they have the highest SAT scores of any university. They want to say they have the highest attained grade, rank in class, etc. And there's a great deal of competition now for those, because there is a lot to do with rank of the universities and their endowments and what they get. So it's a complicated and I won't say vicious, but it's a complicated puzzle, because no one thing all of a sudden reared its head. It all sort of a snowball, and now everybody's looking at it. I think we're going to get cooperation from university presidents. I also think, to be very blunt with you, my hope is that states will, as their economies pick up, get back more in the business of aiding their state universities, taking some pressure off that way. But there's it's a big deal. And again, you're paying $68,000. That means you and your husband have to make the first over $100,000 you make. You have to make at least $100 to pay that $68,000. So and you're in the position I was. I made a good salary as a senator when I got there, $42,000. But you took out tuitions, there wasn't a lot less, and so that's why you're able to borrow. That's why you had to borrow. But we got to stop this cycle. We got to stop this cycle. That's more than you wanted to know, but that's as honest as I can be. Tony, you want to add anything to that?
I think the only comment I would add is, I think the other challenge we have is there's not enough incentive to really get more efficiency. So you have costs going up, but what are new instructional practices, right? What are new, more cost-effective ways to reach more students, to ensure they're not graduating with more credits, taking more classes than what they might necessarily need, and getting higher completion. And so this notion of productivity, you've had costs going up, but really not enough effort to really improve the overall productivity.
One of the things people are doing, some universities are doing, they're going to 3-year programs. So instead of taking 15 credits a semester for 4 years, people are now saying, well, wait a minute, maybe we can extend the school year, do summer, take 21 credits and get out of there in 3 years, cutting the cost by almost a third, by a quarter to go. There's a lot of things that great universities are now experimenting with in order to figure out how to contain cost and keep them at the rate of inflation or lower. This is the only place where costs have gone up more than healthcare. Okay, I can do yes or no if we get some quick, because am I in trouble with the principal yet? What, are they supposed to be back in school? They're okay? All the way in the back, up against the wall. The guy raising his hand there.
Are we still doing only yes and no? Are we still doing only yes or no, or can I ask it?
You can ask whatever you want, man.
I was wondering what you believe your strengths and weaknesses are as both a candidate or an individual.
My strength is my youth. And my full head of hair. It's a real burden carrying this much hair, you know? Look, my dad used to have an expression. He'd say it's a lucky man or a lucky woman who gets up in the morning, puts both feet on the floor, knows what they're about to do, and thinks it still matters. I think the greatest strength anyone can bring to public service is believing that what they do really matters. That it really matters. Not matters to them, matters to the people that they serve. There's a lot of people more talented than me, and there's a lot of people who are arguably more qualified than I am. But I was raised to believe that you really had an obligation, if you didn't like the way things were going, to stand up, say what you mean. My greatest strength is probably my greatest liability. I think most of the public elected officials here will tell you no one has ever once questioned my word in politics. No one has ever questioned my word. And no one has ever doubted that what I say I mean. The problem is I say what I mean too often. And so the upside of my being straightforward is the downside, that sometimes I'm straightforward, and when I'm straightforward, it gets me in a lot of trouble. I am, the critics would say with some honesty, I am not disciplined. Discipline means you should be sharp enough not to respond to every question you're asked. I have a tendency to do that. But when the president asked me to be vice president, it's an honest to God true story, he kids about it even publicly, I said on two conditions. One, I'll never wear a funny hat, meaning I won't do anything out of character. And two, I'm not going to change my brand. I am not, at this stage of my career, not going to curtail my willingness to be the way I am of just being straightforward. And by the way, I don't mean that. It's not like I'm straightforward. Being straightforward sometimes is not always the best. Adlai Stevenson once said, you know, sometimes people should understand they should not rush history. I think my greatest strength is also my greatest liability, but it's who I am, and it's not going to change, so that's it. Over here, the lovely lady and the blonde-haired lady under the sign VP. Well, there's two lovely ladies raising their hand. The one on the left with the black sweater first. Okay.
Hi.
Well, that's the white shirt, but that's okay. And then we'll go with the black sweater.
On the topic of education, with the unemployment rate being so high, say both my parents were unemployed, how would I afford college or a college loan?
Well, I hope they're not unemployed, but if they were, you would immediately qualify for a Pell Grant. You would be able to not borrow, but get enough money that would pay the tuition for the average state tuition nationwide. Tuition, not room and board, tuition. And so you'd be able to get close to $6,000. It would be a grant. You'd never have to pay back. And so you'd be able to, if you lived near a university, that was a four-year university, the average is, again, average nationwide is about $6,200. And there's very few, I don't think there's any community college that costs more than that. Pray God that's not the way you have to qualify to get the loan. Secondly, one of the things that we are doing in everything we've done is trying to change the equation. So, for example, the day I raised my right hand on that magnificent day in the mall with over 1 million people looking, I looked out at those folks literally, and you could see the sense of excitement but also fear in their eyes about what this nation was facing. Before I lowered my hand on January 20th, we'd already lost 720,000 jobs that month in the first 20 days of January. We lost $3,800,000, I wish it were dollars, jobs in the previous quarter. And before we passed the first piece of legislation dealing with the economy, we lost another 3 million jobs. In the last 22 months, we've added jobs, private sector jobs, in every single quarter. And so I think we're about to turn the corner. We just had this great event at the White House, and it was called, you're going to start hearing a word that growing up in Pennsylvania and the Northeast, I've heard the opposite word for the bulk of my career and my life. You hear about outsourcing. I bet every student knows what outsourcing is. It means the steel plant moved to China or Mexico, the automobile plant moved to Mexico, the dress factory moved to Singapore, etc. Outsourcing. We're losing jobs in waves. Well, guess what? You're going to hear the word over the next 4 to 10 years, insourcing. We met yesterday, 2 days ago, with the chairman of the board of Siemens, one of the largest corporations in the world, the chairman of the board of Ford Motor Company, the chairman of the, by the way, he's here in case I give the wrong answer. Remember I told you that it's worrisome that sometimes I say things I shouldn't. He has the hook. I'm embarrassed him. He's Secret Service, he's armed, I shouldn't make him angry. Because I could see some of you looking at, who's that good-looking guy? Those guys with little things in their ears, they're talking to themselves, but they're good. Anyway, all kidding aside, so here's the deal. What we're finding out, which is, I know those of you who, some of you in Pennsylvania know me relatively well because I get as much coverage over the years on Philadelphia television as anybody, actually, on balance, more than any Pennsylvania senator or congressman over the years. And I've been a broken record about our competitive advantage. Everybody talks about how China's eaten our lunch already. 72% of the American people think we're losing to China. That's absolute malarkey. Absolute malarkey. Guess what's happening now? They're talking about bringing jobs back from China that we sent to China. Why? Because cost of business in China is going up wages 20% per year, number one. Number two, they're stealing our intellectual property, so companies aren't going over there and building anymore because they can't be sure their patents will be secure. That's a great question. Maybe I can get it. The question was, what can we do to help produce overseas? Guys, I don't know if you know this, but only 1% of America's population are fighting these wars. 1%. One. But as my wife Jill and Michelle who travel the country working for military families point out, 99% of America has an obligation to them. My wife has a great expression. There's an awful lot of families right here in Pennsylvania who are in the National Guard and Reserves. Their families don't live in military bases. They live in your neighborhood. They go to your church, their families. And life goes on every single day for you, normally. But your neighbor 3 doors down who has a son or a daughter in Afghanistan for a year. Your neighbor down the street has a husband or wife who's gone. They do what my wife did every single solitary morning. She's a teacher. I'd walk in. She'd always be in the kitchen before me. This is my word is life. I'd walk in. I'd see her standing there over the sink with her coffee cup and mouthing a prayer that the National Guard general's wife gave. There's not a mom or a dad, a husband or wife, a brother or sister, or someone in Afghanistan right now. I said Afghanistan because we're out of Iraq, in Afghanistan today, who I promise you, 20 times a day, doesn't think of doesn't think of their son or their daughter. It doesn't happen. Every day, it's on their mind. And they don't want you to do anything special for them. But when they're the only ones around, when they're the only ones in their neighborhood who are deployed, they just want to know somebody knows. Just somebody knows. Fitzpatrick cares about you. We all care about you. The question is, what are we going to do for you? What we're going to do for you is give you a chance, because I'm absolutely convinced all we got to give you is just an even chance, and you guys will own the world. Thank you all very, very much.